going to want me to use this. Good evening. My name is Jamie Fullerton. I'm the Associate Dean here in the School of Global Studies in OSU Global, and I just am so happy to see everybody out on this beautiful spring day. This is our final global briefing series of the semester, and we have among us many special guests, but I want to point out that the students from Jenks High School are here, and you guys can wave at us. And we appreciate you being here visiting OSU today. I also want to say hola to our friends in Mexico who are listening in by stream from Upayap in Puebla. I'm very excited about our speaker tonight. As some of you know, I teach in the public diplomacy track in our Global Studies Masters, and so I study public diplomacy, but our speaker tonight actually does public diplomacy, which is an extra special treat for me. This is Dan Langenkamp. He's a Deputy Director and Spokesman for the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs at the State Department. And prior to that, he served as a legislative fellow with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. From 2020 to 2023, he was actually in the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv as a spokesperson and press attaché, working in Ukraine just before Russia's invasion, and afterwards from the Poland-Ukraine border. Prior to Ukraine, he had served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Uganda, Vietnam, and Côte d'Ivoire. And in Washington, he served as the desk officer for Turkey, desk officer in the NATO office, and as a watch officer in the department's 24-hour operations center. Wow. Dan was a reporter for 6 years prior to the State Department career, working for Reuters and other news organizations in Hungary and the Balkans. He was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Budapest from 1993 to 1995 and holds degrees from Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, Columbia College in New York City, and the Fletcher School at Tufts University. He spends his spare time advocating for safe streets and bicycling infrastructure, raising his 2 boys, coaches soccer, running, I think you even got in a run today, playing tennis, and then he says he speaks, or at least has been taught, 5 languages. So, thank you so much, Dan. We're so happy to have you at OSU.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you all. Okay, so it is so great to be back in Oklahoma. I don't need to use that microphone, no. Right? Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. So it's so great to be back. I'm from here. I'm from Tulsa. I went to Booker T, as Jamie said. And it's incredible to be back here because people are so friendly. Yeah. It's just infectious and wonderful. And just, you probably don't know this, but the big skies and the light of Oklahoma are unlike anywhere else in the world. It just feels good to be back home. So Jamie read my very long biography, which makes me feel very old. Life is funny. One thing leads to another, and suddenly you realize that you've been doing something for 20 years. After another career, when I was a journalist for 7 years, I don't feel like I'm, 30 years into my career, but I guess I am. Today, actually, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this career of mine that has been just so interesting and rich, with the very clear objective of trying to persuade you to also join the Foreign Service and serve your country by working around the world, doing what we do, trying to promote U.S. interests. And then I want to talk to you specifically about Ukraine, which was my last job abroad, because we need your help. We need help in the United States, specifically in Middle America, especially supporting Ukraine. I'd like to explain what our policy is and explain why we are investing so much U.S. funding to help that country survive amidst this awful, atrocious war. First, I want to thank Jamie. I want to thank Bailey. I want to thank Patricia. I want to thank Bob Leeser at the Tulsa Global Alliance, and all of the rest of you who have helped make this trip successful It's been super fun. I was just at the Center for Sovereign Nations, which was a really meaningful and fun visit also. The students there, in case you've never met them, are basically all affiliated with one or another Native American tribe. And I'm speaking to them, or I spoke with them for the same reason I'm speaking to you, which is that if our foreign service is not representative of all of America, then we are not truly able to represent America. We're not able to pursue American interests around the world in a way that is truly doing justice to you. Okay, so let me see. Let me pull out yes, let's hope this works. I can just use the little, I can use this too. Okay, so I have two things I really want to talk about. And first is the U.S. Foreign Service, which I mentioned, and then the stakes in Ukraine. Talking about the U.S. Foreign Service, I want to just walk you through the way my career has been so you understand what it really means to work in the Foreign Service. Okay, and I'll just get right to it so that I don't waste too much time. I grew up in Tulsa, and my father was a lawyer, and he always had an interest in international affairs, and we started traveling when I was in high school to Latin America on our spring breaks. And so here's a picture of us on the Mexican border. This is near Chihuahua, and that literally is the Rio Grande behind us where the donkey is. Back in those days, you could just walk back and forth. I think we had just eaten taquitos in Mexico, and we were going to get back in our canoes and go down the river more towards the next place. This was sort of all near Big Bend in Texas. Probably there's big things floating in gates and razor wire in the water now. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, we started traveling as a kid, as a family, when I was a kid. This is in Guatemala. We had just camped near this tree. We had no tents during that trip, and it just rained all night long. And it was right next to a coffee farm. This other picture is of us also in Guatemala, and we had gone to some zoo or something, and they were showing us a snake. It's a snake around my dad's neck. Anyway, this whole thing started me on this path of living abroad and just learning what it was like I learned what it was like to travel around the world and see life from a different point of view. And it inspired me to join the Peace Corps after college. And if you are thinking about, if you just want to travel around the world or see the way other people live, I really recommend the Peace Corps. Because it's actually, if you can get yourself in, it is so easy. The U.S. government pays for your flight, they give you a job, they give you health care, you have this administrative support. And then when you're done, they give you, I think it's $10,000 to come back and reintegrate yourself back into the United States. So they sent me to Hungary in 1993, just after the Berlin Wall had come down. And I got to be an English teacher there. And I learned all about how a country that's facing tumultuous change faces the world. That led me to stay in Hungary for another 5 years after I finished the Peace Corps. And that's when I became a journalist. I worked for some local newspapers, and then I worked for Reuters, the newswire, which basically writes news for people around the world. And then when I was a reporter, I got to know the people at the U.S. Embassy because I was covering the United States. And they had like the American guy on staff. Most of the staff were Hungarians. And so the U.S. Embassy people were like, you should think about joining the Foreign Service. You could be a public affairs officer, you could be a spokesperson, and then you get to stay in this career, this lifestyle where you get to live around the world. And journalism was kind of dying at the time. And so I said, that's pretty interesting. So I ended up joining the Foreign Service. Long story short, I ended up joining the Foreign Service, and one of my very first jobs was in Afghanistan, just after the invasion, after the Taliban struck, or after bin Laden struck the World Trade Center. And we were in a sort of a reconstruction and a peace-building mission there, and I spent a lot of time hanging out with this Army unit. We covered 3 provinces for about 2.5 million people in the eastern part of the country. Spent a lot of time on the floor of different houses, talking with people about their problems and building schools, building medical clinics, on trying to project the power of the central government around the country at this time. This was, spent a lot of time with people with guns. This was a village that we rolled up into that had heard that we were coming to attack them. And we rolled up in our Humvees, and there were people lining the roads with their weapons out, pointed at us. And it was one of those moments where you realize, anything could go wrong here. Anything could, if any one of these soldiers who were from New York City accidentally shot off their weapon, we would all be dead. We went in there, we had a meeting just like that one. We're all sitting on the ground talking about their issues. And they realized we were there to help. We were there to build schools. We were there to build, build a medical clinic, talk to them about what their problems were. And then before long, we were, talking about disarmament and how to, get these guys jobs. And we were all friends. I mean, essentially, it became a place where we went back over and over and over again over the course of the year that I was there. And so, anyway, that was when we had just begun this friendship after these guys had, been thinking that they were going to kill us. This is another picture, more people with guns. Lots of meetings like this. These were school kids who studied outside, just walking around the village. I'm going to race through this. So now, my next posting was in Vietnam. And here I was an economics officer. So I actually worked with the Vietnamese government on two things. One was agricultural policy, trying to help, and I worked with our Foreign Agricultural Service, help them with rice production. And this is our US ambassador, and we had gone to this village up in the north of Vietnam to basically talk to them about the kind of seeds that we use, the kind of rice that we use, their production capabilities. And another thing I did was labor practices. So Vietnam had, I'm sure that there's probably 10% of you that are wearing clothes that are made in factories just like this in Vietnam. They make clothes for Tommy Hilfiger, for Polo, for Nike, for every manufacturer that you can think of come from factories just like this. And so we were working to make sure that they were abiding by labor standards that were in accordance with international labor law, labor practices, and consistent with those that are spread by the International Labor Organization. So can the workers get out? Are there children working there? Do they have normal working hours, and are they getting paid overtime? Things like that were at the top of our minds as we walked around these factories and looked at stuff. They would run like 50,000 shirts through this factory, and then they would do 30,000 T-shirts, and then they would do 10,000 pants. These are incredible operations, and they're all over Vietnam now. So I did that as working in Vietnam. This was when President Bush visited, so that's the younger Bush right there, and that's the president of Vietnam. He came for 4 days to talk about these different things, and he talked about establishing a Peace Corps program there, another project that I worked on because I was the Peace Corps volunteer that was on staff. Just a beautiful country. This is China Beach, or a city called Da Nang, which those who are older in this room will know is the place where the US forces were stationed during the Vietnam War. Now it's just this beautiful beach, and spent a lot of time there. Great hotels. This was in northern Vietnam. This is just one of the streets. So Hanoi is an old French city. It was all designed by the French. And so you get these big, beautiful tree-lined boulevards there. Okay, so my wife was in Haiti at the time, and we got married during these years. So I'm just going to show a couple pictures of her negotiating in the market. I don't have a lot of her pictures here. Unfortunately, I put this together last night, and I couldn't find any other good pictures. But anyway, she was there. Surprise, we hear so many bad things about Haiti, but it is a beautiful country with great restaurants. And in this little area of the town that she lived in was quite nice. She was there in a more stable period than now. And so now I don't think you can do this as an American diplomat. We moved from there straight to Uganda. So, all the way across the world for basically both of us. This is us standing literally at the equator. That is the line that divides the world in half. We drove all over the place. I'm sorry? What year? That was 2007, 8, and part of 9. Yeah. And so as some of you might know, in Uganda at this time was facing a rebellion by a group called the Lord's Resistance Army. Has anybody ever heard of them? So there was a big student movement at the time to help the children that had been kidnapped by this army. So the leader of that army, called Joseph Kony, thought he was an emissary from God, and he would kidnap children, feed them a mixture of cocaine and gunpowder, and basically force them to fight. He would tell them that with this mixture, they would be invulnerable to bullets. And it was a scourge on northern Uganda for, I guess, almost 15 years before we in the U.S. Embassy at our defense attaché's office and others helped them finally kill Joseph Kony. That is something I only worked indirectly on. Most of what I did was help U.S. business in Uganda. I helped set up a U.S. Chamber of Commerce so that all the American businesses could join together and then take their issues to the government of the country. We also worked on a lot of health policy because HIV/AIDS was a huge problem there. Going the wrong direction. Wonderful game parks. So we flew on this airplane up to this game park in the north near the Sudanese border. That's our house. That's our street. No presentation on Uganda would be complete without pictures of wildlife. And then we went to Iraq right after that, straight from Uganda. This is a famous statue of crossed swords that commemorates the Iran-Iraq War. And I spent most of the time embedded with the U.S. Army there. So that's a Humvee and that's a soldier that was just getting ready to roll on a mission. Excuse me. I did refugee work there. So I was in charge of working with UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in finding sites like this where people. So let me back up. We were there during the Obama years when a lot of people were returning to Iraq because it had become stabilized. And our job was to find these places where people were returning who didn't have houses, who didn't have water and food, or other assistance that they needed. They didn't have jobs. So I coordinated these humanitarian organizations trying to help them get the things that they needed. More time hanging out with guys with guns. We spent a lot of time drinking tea. This guy was a U.S. Army interpreter, and he's now a U.S. citizen. He came after the Iraq War. He came on our special immigrant visa program. There we were in northern Iraq in a Kurdish refugee camp, doing an education project. We were basically monitoring this project. So the U.S. government gives a lot of money to non-governmental organizations. And at an embassy, if you're a refugee coordinator, you spend your time overseeing those organizations and making sure that they're not wasting the money. We also did elections work. So this was right after the Iraqi elections. And we traveled all over a certain province going to polling booths and making sure that they were not intimidating people, that people's ballots were being correctly marked. And so that was really, really interesting and fun. This is just a picture that I took from the helicopter that I was flying in one day. So we flew around all over the country in helicopters. That's the Tigris. And this is a picture I only show because that's my foot. So my seat was right on the edge of the helicopter. And we flew all over the country like that. And I was just buckled in with like this little kind of, this pathetic, totally unsafe seatbelt that, like I could have fallen out of the helicopter if I weren't careful. Anyway, that's my wife looking very unhappy because she hated it. And then we moved to Côte d'Ivoire after almost a year of language study. So this was one of the events we put on. We did a giant beach cleanup, and we're trying to sort of convey environmental values. And we had more than 1,500 people that went down to the beach, and we cleaned up a mile of the beach. It was the biggest beach cleanup that they had ever had in Côte d'Ivoire. And then we had a giant reggae party at the end, and that's what this was. We got the embassy had these great tents with the American flag. So it had this other view. This is a big public diplomacy thing. This other idea here was to project American values and let people understand what it means to be American. It means that we care about the environment. It means that we have fun. It means that we do things for each other and create a better world by working together. And that reggae artist I'm still in touch with, his name was, what was his name? I forget, Alpha Dobi. Anyway, this is more Cote d'Ivoire. We were doing that's the ambassador, and we were going and visiting villages that we had provided projects in. And these ladies came out, and they were singing these incredible songs. So I did a soccer program, and I want to see if I got this video for the soccer program here. Okay, I'm going to try to play this, and it doesn't look like it's going to actually work. Oh, it doesn't. I don't think it's going to work here. Okay, so let me go back. Anyway, we did a soccer program, and Cote d'Ivoire had a divide between Muslims in the north and Christians in the south. And they had been through a war that lasted more than a decade. And we were part of the international community's effort, or we were taking part in the international community's effort to try to project peace and teach people about ethnic reconciliation and religious reconciliation. So I did a soccer program that actually tried to teach the values of conflict resolution and the values of democracy through sport. And we did that by basically saying, if you're going to play a sport, you've got to abide by certain rules. And if you don't abide by those rules, not only is that other team never going to play you again, but the whole league might fall apart. And what we did in each of these towns where we held this camp was we selected 2 kids that became a part of a team of national unity. We sent those kids to Atlanta, and they came back, and then they did their own tour. We got lots of press. And anyway, one kid we chose was the prince of this little tribe in western Cote d'Ivoire, and they made me an honorary king. So I'm an honorary king of a tribe. And they fed me, they gave me this giant banquet, and they gave me frog stew, which was really, really gross. So I don't recommend West African frog stew. It was brown and kind of gloopy. Anyway, we gave some camera equipment to a Muslim radio station. I was there. Another public diplomacy project. I mean, I was the public diplomacy officer there, so I did a lot of this kind of thing. And that really won them over. I mean, they were not hostile or anything like that to the United States, but this really, really made them friends of ours. And then later on, I had Voice of America come in and do trainings with them. So to this day, they're friends of the embassy. And you can understand how important it is to have that voice be friendly to us. This was Women's Day, and we all took this African fabric and made clothes out of it. So that's my wife and I. I had a tie. She had a really great shirt. Anyway, that's my son. Parting shot. We just did some really great travel there with our family. Okay, then we went to Ukraine. So almost another year of language training. We went to Ukraine. And these photos are you can see that's St. Andrew's Church, a really beautiful old church behind us. And then this is in a town called Kharkiv that has been almost completely destroyed in the last 2 years. In fact, over the last month, the Russians have targeted it and taken out its entire electricity system, and they're now surviving only on generators. This zoo, it's actually at a zoo, has been completely destroyed. And it's a tragedy that I actually want to talk to you about today. This is just downtown Kyiv. That's St. Sophia, a beautiful old 1,000-year-old church. And actually, one of the funny things is that Russia says that Ukraine has no history of its own. It says it has no culture of its own, it has no language of its own. This church existed before Moscow existed. And all of these churches like this were in Kyiv, which was the center of Kievan Rus, before Moscow had a single building. Moscow was a forest when this was built. It just goes to show how Putin's narrative about Ukraine is a false one. It's one that he wants us to believe in order to be able to prosecute this war. Ukrainians are incredibly proud of their culture, of their country, and this was just before the war. An older woman that had gone out to do weapons training with a whole bunch of others, and this tweet from Richard Engel says, the woman says, "Your mother would do this too." So this is where Sarah and I were as the war was getting started. This is just a picture of with the National Security Council's spokesperson, John Kirby, who you see in the news a lot. He came there. Have you heard of John? You know John Kirby? So he is the guy who speaks for the White House on foreign affairs. And he had come there, and we were talking about, this is before the war, what we were going to say to Russia, basically, through this press conference. The Secretary of Defense was there. And we basically said, you know, Russia, you do not have a veto on Ukraine's foreign policy. You don't get to tell Ukraine whether it gets to be part of NATO or whether it wants to be westward. We also did this. This is more public diplomacy. So we had a giant press conference on the tarmac of the airport when we were flying in all of those weapons. Does anybody know what that weapon is? Anybody? Any Army, military people here? So those are all javelins. Have you guys heard of the javelin before? So the javelin is this incredible anti-tank weapon. You get to shoot it you can shoot it from your shoulder, and it will target the tank, you know, a kilometer away and blow it up from the top. And these javelins did more than any other weapon to push back the Russians in the first days of the war. So just before the war got started, we pushed in as many of these things as possible. And we brought the press to see us doing that, to try to send a message of deterrence to Russia. It didn't work, but the javelins made a big difference. So after the war got started, my wife and I were two of the diplomats that did not evacuate to the United States, and we stayed on the Russia-Poland border and helped out. This is me and Secretary Blinken in a refugee center for the Ukrainians that had just come across. So he visited just days after the war started. And that's a picture of the airport with our acting ambassador, who, the woman, and we were just watching we were helping the weapons flow into Ukraine from there. This was so I got to be one of the few diplomats that returned to Ukraine just as soon as we were able in May, and that's just a tank along the side of the road. We did a giant press conference, and that's the U.S. ambassador in front of the same big church that I told you about, St. Sophia. We must have had 50 journalists from all over the world there. So that's it. So that's it. That's the end of the slideshow. I guess the reason I did this is not only because I like seeing pictures of myself, but I just sort of want to give you a sense of what it's like to be a diplomat. As you can see from these pictures, I've been able to do everything. It's incredible. I've done economic work, helping Vietnam, or ensuring that Vietnam abides by labor standards. I've done political work in Afghanistan, trying to extend the power of the central government. I've done public diplomacy work, trying to basically share our values with the rest of the world and help other people understand what it means. That's what you get to do as a U.S. diplomat. It's super fun. It's super interesting. It's not standing at cocktail parties talking about, I don't know, what people talk about at cocktail parties. It's actually interesting, engaged work all over a country in ways that most Americans simply don't understand. And that is why I'm here. I really want you to understand what it means to do this work. And I want you to join the Foreign Service if you can. You have to take a test. It's very straightforward. If you pass the test, you get in. They give the test several times a year, and then your career starts. You don't have to have a special background. You don't have to have any kind of special education. I was telling Jamie earlier, we had a hot dog salesman that was in my class. We had people that didn't have college degrees in my class. We had, we had lawyers, we had teachers, we had farm workers join. And we want that. And we want people from all different backgrounds because, as I said earlier, without these backgrounds, we don't represent the United States. We're not bringing our best people to the fight. This diversity that I see in this room is what makes the United States special. And without you, we're like fighting with one arm tied behind our backs. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about Ukraine. And I will try not to bore you, and I'll try to get this done. How much time do we have?
Well, about 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness, okay. I'm going to cut this short. So I'm going to go through this, and I will...
Leave some time for Q&A. So
Yeah, okay.
20 minutes is
Yeah,
good.
okay, great. So you heard about the supplemental getting passed. That was a giant funding package in the US Congress that will help Ukraine survive for another day. It won't help Ukraine survive for the longest time, but it will give them the weapons that they need to continue the struggle at least this year. There are three big reasons why we really need to keep funding this fight. And the first one is that, excuse me, without funding Ukraine, the system that has held the world together since World War II will fall apart. We're already seeing Russia basically trying to throw up the rules-based international order and say, we can go in and take Ukraine because we think Ukraine is ours. But that is not the way the world is supposed to function. After World War II, we set up a system that said states get to decide on their international alliances. State sovereignty is a bedrock principle, so you can't just walk in and try to take another state by force. And we're all going to agree to that system. What Russia has done is basically say, no, that doesn't matter. In our sphere of influence, we're allowed to do whatever we want. That's why Ukraine must and I think will win this fight. The second reason is that Putin can't be emboldened. If we let him get away with this, it is a fantasy to think that he's going to stop there. And we know this because every time Putin has an internal crisis in Russia, he causes an external crisis that he uses to shore up his own power in the country. That's what he did this time. It's what he did in Georgia. It's what he did in Transnistria earlier. It's what he did in Azerbaijan and Armenia before that. He does it over and over and over again. We also know from World War II what happens when you appease a dictator. That's what happened in the Sudetenland with the Czech Republic and with Hitler. They thought they could appease Hitler and then he would stop. He didn't stop. He kept going. It's what dictators do. We cannot send this message around the world that this is okay. And that's the third point. Other dictators around the world are going to take their lessons from Putin. And they're going to realize that if he can get away with this, that they can get away with it too. So what will China do in Taiwan? What will happen in Africa? What will happen throughout the Middle East? So we have to be very careful about this. And I would say a fourth thing is about US credibility. I mean, if we don't back up Ukraine now, what are people going to say about the United States? So what are we doing to help Ukraine win? It's not just military assistance. There's a really insistent program or an important program on political development. We're helping them join the European Union and NATO with our assistance and with our political advice. We're helping their economy. We are helping also, so we're helping them. We have planks of military, political, and economic support. Just one more word, and I think I'll wrap up after that. This support that we're providing Ukraine, the $60 billion that just got passed, and all the other money gets spent mostly in the United States. People don't realize this, but this money goes to supply our weapons manufacturer or fund our weapon manufacturers to build new weapons so that we send our old weapons to Ukraine. And some of these manufacturers are here in Oklahoma. So in Grove, Oklahoma, not far from Tulsa, which is in Breccine's district, they are making what are called J-dams, which are like a thing that can outfit a missile to be precision guided. Incredibly destructive and important for the Ukrainian Air Force. And then down in Tom Cole's district, in District 4, in Elgin, Oklahoma, they are making howitzer parts, which are one of the most effective weapons that allows, it's artillery that allows Ukraine to fight back. Long and the short is, it's really important for us to continue to support Ukraine. And I hope that you understand that also. So that's it, and I'm really looking forward to your questions.
Wow. You did some cool stuff.
It's been such a great career.
Yeah. Okay. Who has questions for Mr. Langenkamp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yep.
Let me walk up here so that our people on TV can hear you.
Okay.
Tell us who you are.
Okay, I'm Alicia D'Almeida. I'm from Jinx High School, and I'm involved in ISP. So this question is just out of curiosity. I just wanted to ask, what's the hardest part about what you do, and what advice would you give anyone wanting to be involved with the Peace Corps?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad you asked about the Peace Corps. Okay, the hardest part of what I do, oh boy, is dealing with the uncertainties that come when you have a really big challenge. You need to sort of, and in dealing with those uncertainties, you have to get other people on board. So when I say this, I mean you need to figure out a way to persuade a whole room of other people up and down the chain of command that this idea that you've got is a good one. Because you can never do anything on your own. And it's not good to do things on your own, all by yourself. So as you go through your career, you begin to realize that your persuasive power, your ability to show people that you're a person of credibility, that you've got good ideas, and that you're a team player is really, really important. So believe it or not, your interpersonal skills are the most important skill you have as a diplomat. So that's that question. I think the other, on your Peace Corps question, go to their website and find out, how to join. The best way to join is to get some experience in the thing that you want to do in the Peace Corps. So they have beekeepers, and they have English teachers, and they have small business people, they have environmental people, they have health people. Ag people. So you're going to take what you're good at, what you've got experience in. I didn't really have any experience, although I'd done a little bit of teaching. And so I spoke to the recruiter, and he said, you need to get more teaching experience. So I went and I got a job like tutoring kids in a school in New York City where I was going to college. And that was good enough, and then I got in. So the Peace Corps actually, it's not a quick process. So prepare to spend 9 months getting yourself ready. And that recruiter will tell you, you need more of this, you need to do this. And if you follow their instructions, you'll get it. It's not difficult, actually.
I want to add that we have a wonderful fellowship here at OSU School of Global Studies for Peace Corps, returning Peace Corps volunteers. So it just keeps giving. You go do your Peace Corps work, then you can come back and get your master's with this fellowship. Okay, who has another question? Clinton?
Oh, I think we actually have to go to him first, and we'll go to you next, Clinton.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who do we have? The high schoolers are really good about asking questions.
Great.
I got to get my college students to be better. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jackson Garrett. What would you say is the next step of involvement with Ukraine and helping them win the war? And if they do lose, what are further steps we'll take to prevent Russia from expanding?
Okay, those are tough and good questions. 2024 is going to be a critical year. These weapons that we are now funding will go straight into the country. In fact, I'm sure the Senate was going to pass its bill, and the President's going to sign it this week. And next week, we'll start to see weapons flowing. Because these are weapons, we're going to fund our own new weapons, better technologies, and we're going to give them our old stuff. So they need to hold Russia back on the front lines. But almost as importantly, they need to get their economy going. They had 5% economic growth last year, and they're probably going to have 5% this year. They've done incredible things with their economy, keeping it going. They've pushed the Russians back in the Black Sea so that they can get their grain flowing again, because most of it's exported through the Black Sea, going to Africa, going to the Middle East. That will give them money, tax revenue, and real revenue to their farmers, which will keep the economy going, which will fund the government. So in this next 2 years, what we need to see is that economic growth start up even more vigorously so that we don't have to fund the war. And so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. And they need to hold Russia back. And in fact, it would be good if they could see some advances. One thing I want to mention in all of this is Russia is doing a very, very good job of convincing Americans through its disinformation apparatus that Ukraine is failing and that Ukraine can never win the war. It's a lie. It is incredible what Ukraine has been able to do in the last 2 years. They've won back 50% of the land that Russia took. They have restarted their economy. They've kept their electricity system going. They've kept teachers in schools. They've kept the hospitals operating. It's incredible. Russia does not want you to know that, but it's important. And so anyway, those are the big 2 things I would say. They also have to do reforms that are going to help them join the European Union and join NATO in the future. So that's the long and the short of it.
Okay. Clint, introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Clinton Wanka, and I'm in the Global Studies program as a graduate student. Yeah. It is clear that US is definitely in support of Ukraine, but then 10 years ago, 2014, when Russia annexed the Crimea region, yeah, in Ukraine, it looks like, though everybody condemned, like the international community condemned that act of Russia, but then it doesn't seem like nothing was actually done to like deter Russia from doing that. And right now, here we are seeing the back and forth between Russia and Ukraine and then the international community. So I want to know, how is the US stance when it comes to the Crimea region, and what are you guys doing to formulate policies that can help save the Crimea region?
Yeah, so Crimea, so just so that all of you understand, in 2014, Russia invaded. Remember the little green men? There was basically an occupation that took place. Russia sort of slipped its soldiers into Crimea, claiming that they didn't know who they were, that this was just like a local military operation. That was just a lie. Actually, they were Russian soldiers that had just taken off their badges. And so they invaded and they took. And this was a retribution. This was an attack that came because Ukraine, just months before, had kicked out a pro-Russian president and held a bunch of demonstrations that said, we want to be in the European Union. Those protests forced this president out. Russia said, no, 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 this is our space, you can't do that. And then they invaded Crimea, and then they launched the first invasion that went into the eastern part of Russia. So there was before this big invasion, there was a whole invasion that took place. And you're right, the international community didn't do enough. We thought we were doing a lot. We imposed really harsh sanctions on Russia. And we said from the very beginning, Crimea, this part of Ukraine, is never going to be Russian. It's always Ukrainian. I think in retrospect, most of the international community says we didn't do enough. But as you remember, Syria was taking place at the time. There was a massive refugee crisis in Europe at the time. There were refugees coming across from North Africa at the time. And so the international community was a little bit distracted. We are still saying that Crimea will never be Russia's. You know, the truth is, of all of this, is that it's actually for Ukraine to decide how its war, how this is going to end. Ukraine wants all of its territory back, and almost everyone in Ukraine believes that and agrees with that. So it's a big question, but what happens with it? But it's Ukrainian from our point of view.
Another question, we have a little bit of time. Yeah, you'll do.
Hi, my name is Yıldız. I want to ask about these sanctions. Do you think that they're really effective in terms of to fight against the Russian government?
Yeah, thanks. So we have imposed, the United States and the international community have imposed the harshest sanctions on Russia that any country has ever faced. Now, we wonder then why hasn't the Russian economy collapsed? So by one estimate, they have lost $1 trillion because of these sanctions. Their GDP has fallen by about 5%. So something. You can imagine how much more powerful their army and military would be without those sanctions. And then there's all the sanctions that block their importation of sensitive materials. It's made them completely dependent upon China and North Korea and Iran for technology. It's forced them into this little box with other dictatorships around the world. It's completely destroyed their energy industry. Well, it hasn't destroyed their energy industry, but it is lifted Europe's dependence upon Russian energy and forced them to be dependent on Russia, on China, and on India. So Russia's now in this box with dictatorships, and they will never get out of that box until they stop. It's not a good place to be. Do we have to do more? Absolutely. And so my bosses and bosses around the world are working to try to tighten the sanctions to make it even harder for Russia's economy to thrive. You know, I mean, they're taking massive amounts of money out of their health and education sectors and putting it into their military. You know, 1/3 of their budget is now going towards their military industrial base. That will erode support over time for Putin. And we hope it happens soon, but it's probably a long-term project.
I'm back here because Cody has a question. Why don't you stand up and introduce yourself?
Cody Engel from Jinx High School. So recently we had a group of about 25 students in the Nordics and Estonia. Actually took a little trip there. One of our guides mentioned that Estonia has basically dedicated 50% of its military and defense spending to Ukraine. At the same time, they have doubled or anticipate doubling their defense spending. So nations in the Baltics, such as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, while being members of NATO, how do economically on that side, how can they do that without creating inflationary elements that wreak havoc on their economy as a whole?
Right. Yeah. How do they afford it? Basically, it is incredible. The truth is that they have support from their populations who understand the threat that Russia poses. They're making sacrifices that we're not even close to making, and it's inspiring actually. They have experience of what it's like to be ruled by Russia or the Soviet Union in their case. They know the danger that Putin poses to their country. They know that if he gets what he wants in Ukraine, he might be coming for them. And so they're standing up and they're doing everything that they possibly can to fight this. So it all comes down to where's to the public support. It's actually why I'm talking to you today, so that people all over America understand how important it is for us to support Ukraine's fight. Because it's not just about Ukraine. It's about European security and it's about global security. Because if we let them get away with this, we're all in trouble. You know, I think of it like a car. You know, you're driving in your car and you think your car is fine. And then suddenly your tires get bald. And your car won't function if you get a flat tire. Or if the gasoline that you put in your car is tainted. Or if the road is bad and you can't get from A to B, your car won't function. Well, all of that is kind of like the international system that we live in. We can't let these things that are on the outside that seem far away from us in the cockpit of our car deteriorate. If they do, the car won't function. And what Russia is doing is trying to erode the periphery of our international system. Actually, it's going right at the heart of it, of the principles. And we can't let that happen. We really need to stand up.
I think I have one more question in the back, and then we'll move to the front.
Is the Russian use of released prisoners to wage the war a sign of decline, or is that something that might actually be to the benefit of their war effort?
You mean the prisoner exchanges with Ukrainians?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I don't think they're using that so politically. They need their people back, and the Ukrainians need their people back. And that is generally proceeded on an apolitical track. It's one of the only points of contact that the Russians and the Ukrainians have these days. Those negotiations take place fairly well, because they know that if they don't give some of the Ukrainians back, the Russians won't get their own.
How do you think that plays in Russia, though, using their prisoners more or less as conscripts?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about something else, the use of Russian prisoners to fight in Ukraine. Oh, yeah. Well, it makes for terrible soldiers. I mean, you can just imagine. They don't want to go to the front line. So as you all know, or maybe you don't know, but Russia basically is going to its prisons. It's offering these people freedom in exchange for a year of fighting. And then after a year, if they're not dead, they get to go back into Russia and they just enter society, all of these hardened criminals. I mean, you can imagine like how effective that is, both from a law and order standpoint inside Russia, but also on the front lines. These people don't want to be there at all. And we know, like, they're sending these guys out there often with only 2 weeks training. So they're absolute cannon fodder. And this is why the number of Russian casualties is way, way higher than the number of Ukrainian casualties. Yeah, it's going to over time, it'll wreak havoc inside Russia. That's what we expect.
Okay, one more question, then I have a question. Okay, follow me. Here you go.
Hi, this is Alamin. I'm a graduate student in Eurasian Global. In the summer, I'm going to Slovakia to study about Ukrainian refugees in Slovakia.
Oh, great.
So I have a question, like you talk about US funding, basically the Ukrainian military, that is hard power.
Yeah.
But in terms of soft power, since there are 6.5 million refugees staying in different countries, so in a bad situation, so what US going to do to support those refugees, not only hard power, but that as a soft power?
Yeah.
How much money you are giving to them, or what do you think about their future? Thank you.
I didn't give a good breakdown of the funding. So most of it goes towards security assistance of one type or another. Another big chunk, about, I think it's about $10 billion, is going to go into supporting the Ukrainian economy, helping fund civil servants and doctors and teachers. And then another portion is going to humanitarian assistance. And it's about, it's probably a tenth of the overall amount. I'm actually guessing at that number, but it's been $2 billion since the start of the war, which is a lot by any measure of humanitarian assistance. So there is money going into it. The Europeans are doing much more than we are, and that's a good thing. So I'm really glad you're doing that, and there is funding for it. We are outside of the direct funding for humanitarian assistance in Ukraine, we are also the largest funder of the humanitarian system in the world. So I worked in our humanitarian bureau for 3 years out of my 20-year career. And we're the largest funder of UNHCR. Outside of Ukraine, we give them $1 billion a year, which is more than any other country. So that will continue, and it will be very helpful. The good thing about the Ukrainian refugee community is that most of them have friends and family living in Western Europe, and those people provide places for them to live and ways to eat. And the European Union has given a lot of them the opportunity to work, which is really, really important.
Well, before we leave, I want to give you one more chance to pitch the Foreign Service. And so if you're from Oklahoma, which you are, and you are a high schooler, what would be your next steps if you aspire to be in the Foreign Service? And if you're a graduate student that's about to finish up at OSU, what would be your next step?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a really good question. So I would say, if you're a student, start thinking about getting yourself abroad to get some experience. So think about the Peace Corps, think about an exchange program that will let you live and see what it's like to be abroad. It's really hard to join the Foreign Service if you haven't ever lived abroad at all, because then you find yourself in this foreign country with a difficult job, and you don't know what it's like. And it might be a bummer, it might not be any fun at all for you. You may not want to be away from your family, which is one of the biggest challenges of being a Foreign Service officer. You can't get back sometimes for funerals or for your friends' weddings, for birthdays for your brothers and sisters. It is heartbreaking. So get some experience abroad. To get in the Foreign Service, start reading really widely. Read the news every day. Read The Economist or read the New York Times, or just get on websites and find out about what's going on in the world. Don't stick to your expertise. So if you're good at Latin America because you've studied Spanish or something like that, force yourself to read about the Middle East. Force yourself to read about Africa. Be proactive about your education, and then you'll be better prepared to take that test, which is pretty hard. Was that? Yeah. And as a graduate student, yeah, just take advantage of these opportunities. There's so many. I was so lucky that my dad took me abroad, but it didn't have to be that way. I could have done an exchange program. You can do it as a university student or even as a high school student. The AFS program is amazing. And every single one of the kids that I knew that did AFS became more mature and smarter as a result of it. So think about it.
Thank you. Let me say, I'm going to take one moment to pitch OSU to all of you high school students. We have a wonderful study abroad program, and thanks to very generous donors, Don and Kathy Humphreys, we have a scholarship program that will send you abroad. If you think, I can't go abroad, I can't afford it. If you come to OSU, there are scholarships to get you overseas. So I want you to keep that in mind. And for my graduate students, I put the New York Times Sunday edition on my coffee table every week. You guys need to be picking it up. And don't tell me you're reading it online because I know it's too expensive. It's up there for you. So look at it. Dan, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, they're great questions.